At the Pew Research Center, one of our goals is to study religious groups around the world. Every society is divided in one way or another. I mean, essentially, that is the human condition. But what we find in Israel is that the extent of the division is stark.
We have so many radically different ideas of what does Jewish and democratic mean? How does that work together?
Israelis live in their own bubbles. People live their life in parallel routes.
There has been a major shift in the Israeli Jewish society.
We stick with our own. We stick with our people, the ones that are similar to you. Those are the ones you marry. Those are the ones you stay around. And those are the ones your kids go to school with.
If you don't stick to certain rules, basic rules, your kids won't be Jewish anymore.
I don't like definitions. I'm very bad at that, and self-definitions are very difficult.
It's a bit complicated being in Israel.
No common denominator. The values they see, they are completely different values.
We're talking about religious identity politics. These two dimensions, religion and politics, are deeply intertwined.
To understand Israeli politics and society, it's important to understand not just the differences between the views of Jews and Arabs in Israel, but also to understand the great gulfs within the Israeli Jewish population.
Israeli Jewish society is divided on a spectrum of religious observance. Nearly all Israeli Jews identified themselves as belonging to one of four categories: the Haredi, or the ultra-Orthodox; Dati, often translated as religious; Masorti, often translated as traditional; and Hiloni, best understood as secular.
So I'm definitely Chiloni. I used to be secular who didn't really care for tradition, but still kept it, I don't know, for the sake of my family. And I see myself nowadays more as a secular who cares more about these things, more for myself, and the importance of tradition in my life. While growing up in Israel, you don't get to interact with a lot of people from other, let's say, denominations of Judaism. If you're secular, so you go to school in your school, high school, primary school, elementary, and if you're Haredi, so you go to Haredi high school and primary school.
I think the Haredi community is probably the most complex community here in Israel.
In the regular Haredi system, educational system, it's very strict about its rules. For example, the first girl I ever spoke to is my wife. I never spoke to girls. It's only boys and girls are separated. We've never met non-religious Jews. You know, occasionally you walk in the street, you go to buy something, you go to the mall, you see them, but you have nothing to do with them. They're like out there. There's like a big wall separating between you. It's not a physical wall, but you basically have nothing to do with them.
As an Orthodox Jew, I have to keep some rules, etc. It's a tension between keeping the heritage, keeping the tradition, and passing it on. It's a liability. I mean, it's something on your shoulders, and between yourself as an individual. It's a complex thing.
In a sense, the Dati'im are Orthodox, just like the Haredi are Orthodox. However, there's a key difference. Dati are much more integrated into modern Israeli society than are the Haredim.
Before the Holocaust, to be a Jew meant a lot of different habits, tribes, customs. I think one of what the Holocaust made is to understand that we are one. And as far as I can see it, we have responsibility, each and every one of us, especially after the Holocaust, to keep the Judaism in the world.
It really is a struggle, what Israel is trying to define itself religiously. I don't like definitions. I'm very bad at that, and self-definitions are very difficult. I guess like more Masorati for myself would be, I can have periods when I'm more religious and I have periods when I'm much less religious, and I have moments or situations when I feel more religious and situations when I feel much less religious.
The Masortim form 29% of Israeli Jewish adults, and of the four groups, they are the hardest to characterize. And that's essentially because of how diverse this group is. They display a wide range of religious observance, It's often difficult to say whether they are religious or that they are not religious. What we can say is they often hold the middle ground between religious and secular Jews in Israel. And in fact, I've heard a scholar describe the Masur team as well, a little bit of this and a little bit of that.
I think Judaism itself is going through a change. And here in Israel, it's more intense. It's more intense because there are more points of friction between different kinds of thoughts and ideas and ways of life, and each kind of a more ultra-Orthodox view of life in the politics may make a big difference on on the whole population actually of Israel, and that could make a change, and a more Chiloni way of looking at things will make a big change also in the whole population.
It turns out that these groups are actually very powerful social identities. People conduct a lot of their social relationships and a lot of their family relationships within those confines, those four major streams. Maybe only the Masortiim, who are kind of between the secular and the religious, actually have softer boundaries. But what the Pew study found is that people from different parts of that spectrum really have very little to do with each other, and that's something that speaks to larger divisions in the society.
Where people place themselves on the spectrum of Jewish traditionalism is also strongly associated with their political views and their views toward other groups in the society.
People go to different workplaces. People will get married only with people who live the same kind of lifestyle and have the same kind of political view of things.
We're going to have a problem of 4 tribes, no majority, no connections, no personal connections, no meeting points. When Israel was founded in its beginning year, in the beginning of Israel, the army was that melting pot. You would live wherever, you would grow up whatever, but you would all find yourself at the age of 18 in this place. And the army, from the beginning, the Israeli IDF, had a notion that it wasn't just about the military. It had a social role to play in Israel.
The military experience is something that most Israeli Jews share. Most Israeli Jews love the army. The army is us. The army is our kids.
Today, almost half of Israel's 18-year-olds do not go into the army. They're either Arabs, they're either Haredi, or they're women who say they don't want to go into the army for religious reasons. So it can't be that melting pot.
It's not really an issue. It's pretty obvious to every Haredi child that they're not serving in the military.
Right.
It's not an issue. It's a non-issue unless you're speaking about a very, very small portion of the community and certain people who are not following the straight path in the current system, and there it's an issue. But in general, it's not even like, it's obvious you don't serve in the military.
Right.
The current projections for the Haredim are that the rate of growth is very high. So if it continues as is, their proportion in the total Jewish population in Israel will increase. I can even volunteer a few numbers. We have now about 10 to 12% of the Jewish population. In 2030, it might become closer to 20-25% of the total population Jewish, and in 2050, 2060, it might be as high as 1/3 of the total Jewish population in Israel.
There is no longer a secular religious divide here. What does exist very strongly is an ultra-Orthodox everyone else divide.
The Haredi population today continues to have a very low rate of participation in the labor force. And men tend to study all of their life. The question is whether there will be a change in the propensity of the Haredi to go to work. If more Jewish men will go to work, they will earn more, and so the situation of their families will improve. There will be less of a need of a public subsidy. Maybe they will have more contacts with the rest of the Israeli population.
In this study, when we asked people, can Israel be both a democracy and a Jewish state? All 4 groups said it can be both a democracy and a Jewish state. And it was, in fact, a majority of every group saying yes. However, what happens when there is a contradiction between halakha, Jewish law, and the principles of democracy? That's when Israeli public opinion splits. And it splits very neatly along the lines of these four groups, with the Haredim taking one side of the issue and saying halakha should take precedence, and an equally large share of the Hilonim taking the opposite side of the issue and saying democracy should take precedence.
Halakha and democracy or pluralism contradict a lot of times. When you're talking about gay marriage, for example, there's no way that Haredim or any religious group in Israel can agree with that and go for that. It just can't happen. And the whole pluralism movement is accepting everyone and everything the way they want to be. It can never work.
You can be, tolerant for everything you want, and you can tell people you can choose whatever you want to do, etc., etc., etc. But if you don't stick to certain rules, basic rules, your kids won't be Jewish anymore.
We can't, as Haredim, we can't agree to have everything run here on Shabbat just like it's another regular day, because Shabbat, we believe, and that's a belief that we really base our religion on, that Shabbat is a rest day. And we all grew up on the stories of our great-grandfathers coming to America after the Holocaust and having to work on Shabbat, and they worked Monday to Thursday, and they would get fired every week for refusing to work on Shabbat. It's the children sing the songs. It's like part of, they grow up with that from age 0. So that's not something that can ever work.
Someone coming from the secular tribe, which of course, obviously I would be representing, has more in common, or has a lot in common, from a secular Arab professional living in a village up north than they would have if you think about the core values from a Haredi from Mea Shearim. Because if you ask me and you ask my fellow Arab citizen, where do you put democracy? We put democracy first.
We've got a large and growing minority in Israel that is, first of all, Arab Israeli, and who don't identify with the ethos of Israel as a democratic and Jewish state. They want more democracy, less Jewish. We also have another fast-growing minority population of ultra-Orthodox Jews. And they also don't identify with the ethos of the majority, which sees Israel entwined as the foundation of Israel as Jewish and democratic. And they want to see an Israel that is more Jewish and less democratic.
Israel aspires to be a Jewish democratic state. Some have quipped that it succeeds. It's democratic for the Jews and it's Jewish for the Arabs. So the Arab minority in this country understandably views the attempt to make the government and the state and the symbols Jewish as putting them in an inferior position.
How can you talk about a country that really want to be democracy? And there is, of course, a big contradiction between being democratic and being a Jewish state. I can't say that I'm an Israeli, since Israel considers itself as a Jewish state. I'm not Jewish.
Obviously, the Palestinian question remains big, and it's hard to kind of take it out of the picture because it's the big elephant in the room in the relationship. But let's set it aside for a minute. It's hard to think of the relationship between Arabs and Jews, except in historical perspective. It's not just the structure of the state. And I mean by that both the inception of the conflict itself that has developed a certain sense of identity. I mean, citizenship is first and foremost about identity.
The religious spectrum of Jews in Israel, where people are on that spectrum, is also associated with where they stand on the peace process and their views of Israeli Arabs and of Palestinians.
It comes as no surprise that as you move to the religious right, you also move to the political right. So we're talking not about religious identity alone. We're talking about religious identity politics.
The turn to the right, the rise of ultranationalism, the expansion of religious groups, the focus more on Jewish identity, that has certainly created more tension over the past decade Then, after a period of what it looked really promising in the 1990s.
Of all the questions that we asked in the survey, the one that by far got the most media attention in Israel was the question where we asked Israelis whether they strongly agree, disagree, or strongly disagree with the statement, Arabs should be transferred or expelled from Israel. I think many people were surprised, particularly people on the left side of the Israeli political spectrum were surprised and frankly disconcerted.
אנחנו רואים כאן התפצלות שהיא מסוכנת ביותר לחברה הישראלית. אם יש עוד אנשים במדינת ישראל שחושבים שבמאה ה-21 ניתן לחשוב בכלל על איזושהי אפשרות, אני לא מדבר בצד המוסרי, אלא בצד הריאליסטי, לטרנספר אנשים, או לעשות דבר שבו מדינת ישראל תהיה מדינה דמוקרטית רק ליהודים, שהמובן של מדינה יהודית דמוקרטית היא שהמדינה היהודית תהיה דמוקרטית רק ליהודיה, הוא דבר שהוא פשוט בלתי אפשרי, ואנחנו מיד צריכים לבוא ולדעת איך אנחנו מטפלים בכך.
This question asked for a gut reaction. It did not probe support for or opposition to any specific policy proposal. We found that statistically, there is a tie in the Israeli public when it comes to agreement or disagreement with this statement. 48% agree, 46% disagree. Statistically, that's the same thing. But the division on this issue in the Israeli public mirrored the political rifts we see in the country, and those are strongly tied to the religious rifts we see in the country.
I think the Pew survey did a very great public service in that it raised the level of awareness in front of these polarization trends within the Jewish camp and between the Jewish and Arab camps. It's probably a call to those in charge to think very carefully about what they say and where they lead the community and the country.
I think that despite the growing gaps between secular and religious on political issues, I still believe that a two-state solution is viable. And what we've seen over and over again is that before there's a concrete possibility for a peace agreement, a majority of Israelis are always skeptical and don't believe peace is possible. The moment there's a real offer on the table, the numbers reverse.
We have really kind of universal pessimism, and that has been increasing. And it's in fact reached people who had been optimists in the past. At the same time, when you ask people, okay, let's put the assessment aside for a minute. What if I were to bring a two-state solution to you tomorrow, would you take it? And you still have a majority who say, yes, I'd take it.
With good intentions, we can find solution for everything. With bad intentions, we will be worried about everything, and we will be in this. We will be sinking in such a situation forever.
Inside Israel, we have a new emerging country where there's no majority and minority, but about 4 groups which share this land and have to share the understanding that no one's going away. No one tomorrow morning is going to be shifted, transferred, all of a sudden find a new homeland. We're here together and we have to figure it out.